Hello everyone, this is Charles Walter Buntjer coming to you from San Francisco, and in this video I'm celebrating my 76th birthday 2016 in Portugal. Now I want to tell you that maybe you should at least listen to the middle of this video because I have a very interesting story of how I met somebody in San Francisco who knew somebody in Finland who moved to Porto and wanted to meet me for dinner and talk about senior residence since I have a certificate to run an elderly care facility. Anyway, here we go. I went to the airport and I flew from San Francisco to London and then to Portugal, to Lisbon. And there I got a cab and went to my hotel. Hotel was on the corner in a quiet section of the city. Very, very nice. You can see that my room was at the corner and it was curved, and I had a small balcony that looked over the street. Very nice. There was a nice small restaurant and there was a spa. Very nice, and I really enjoyed it. The streets were just nice to walk around in and enjoy. The next day, I did a 4-hour tour of the city. It wasn't exactly the most exciting city I've ever been to, but the bullfighting ring was really spectacular. And what I liked about it most was that it was the only bull ring, I believe, in the world that they don't kill the bull. They just have the matador go out there in his tight pants and his cape and flaps it around in the bull's face and makes him mad, and he chases him around. And of interest, bulls can't see color, so the red cape that they shake in front of them doesn't mean anything to them except it irritates them to see it flapping around. But of course, the tight pants on the matador and then the red cape flying around gets everybody in the audience very excited. Also of interest, there was a bridge, but when I took the picture, it was just gray. But actually, it's painted a reddish color. So the tour guide said, this is the Golden Gate Bridge of Europe, and especially Portugal. And I was on the bus tour and just shook my head, and he said, what's wrong? I said, I don't think so. I'm from San Francisco, and it doesn't look anything like the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, everybody in the bus cracked up laughing. They just thought it was hysterical. And he just kind of looked at me, and I said, our bridge is Art Deco, really spectacular. So that was the end of that conversation. Then I got back to the hotel, and they were very, very nice. They had set up a little dinner for me, wine, and then the next morning they had set up a spa treatment for me for an hour where I got to have a massage. I got to swim in the huge hot tub. Wow. And then I had tea and little snacks and stuff before I did a 10-hour tour. Now, the 10-hour tour was interesting, but unless you're very religious, I was a little bored. We stopped at town after town, and all we saw was monasteries, cathedrals, huge complexes built for saints, and so on. All that money going into all those buildings instead of going to the poor or the middle class and helping them out. All very strange to me, since Jesus said you could just sit on the hillside and talk to God because he's everywhere. But whatever makes you happy, all that gold that they took from Central and South America and put it all over on the altars and everything because God was going to be happy to have gold and everything. But as I said, whatever floats your boat and makes you happy is fine with me. Then we went to a small town on the ocean. It was about 18 miles west of Lisbon. And we got out and walked around for a while, and that was very nice. And then we had a coffee, I guess. And then back on the bus, and we went up into the hills. And that was the summer palace, Sintra National Palace for the king. And I believe they went there in the summertime when it was hot down farther down, but in the mountains it was cooler. It was really, really interesting. You'll notice the two big white cones on top of the palace, which seems kind of strange, but they were actually chimneys over the kitchens. The kitchen was huge, as in most palaces. And the ceiling, though, on this one was like 20, 30 feet high, and then these huge chimneys. So there were windows up above, so the kitchen was very bright. And with these huge fireplaces running day and night, you know how hot and smoky it was. But at least that helped the smoke go up these huge chimneys and stuff. So actually, it was really an interesting palace, and especially the kitchen. We went back down to the bottom of the hill, and there was a small town there, which was very nice, and we relaxed there and had a coffee. And after a while, the bus came back, and we got on the bus, and off we went back to Lisbon. A really great day. Now it was time for me to go to Porto, so I went to the Lisbon train station. Talk about a fantastic, modern uh, train station. I got on the train, and it was the first time I've actually ridden on a high-speed train in Europe. For some reason, I've always been on buses or airlines, but never on a high-speed train. So it was really a spectacular ride up to Porto. Fast, clean, great views. I think we were going 100 miles an hour at one time. So we get to Porto, and the train station there is really fantastic. It's the old European style. And there were all these huge murals all over, really spectacular. And many of them were tiles that were painted and fired and then glued onto the walls. So that was really interesting. The very modern train station in Lisbon, and then the old European style train station in Porto. Then I went to the hotel when I got out of the train station in Porto, and it was a very nice hotel. And I think I got there around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was started to rain. So I thought, well, I'm not going to really go anyplace this evening or this afternoon with it raining, and I'm tired anyway. So I think what I'll do is I'll just unpack and relax and then have dinner in the hotel because they said it was supposed to be sunny the next day. Well, it was interesting because around 2:30 or so, the phone rang, and it was somebody who lives in Porto who wanted to take me to dinner. Now, I want to talk about how this all happened. This is like a story within a story. Very, very interesting, I think. Months before I went to Portugal, I met a man and he thought I was really interesting and invited me over to his condo with a huge terrace overlooking the city. And I said, sure, why not? So a couple weeks later, I got all dressed up and went to his condo. And there were about 25, 30 people there, all high end, I guess. And I was sitting there all alone with my cocktail, of course, and there was nobody to really talk to because I didn't know anybody. And the host took me aside and we went outside and sat on the terrace with our cocktails and chatted away for an hour or more. And he said he looked at my website and saw that I had an administrative license to run an elderly care facility. He said, of all things, he had a friend who lived in Finland. I said, oh, I've been to Finland. He said, of course you have. So he said, his friend in Finland is an architect and he just moved to Porto. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, he's going to be building really expensive senior residence along the Douro River. And he said he thought it might be nice if we could meet and I could talk to him about what it was like to get certificates to run facilities and what needed to be done and all that sort of thing. And I said, sounds good to me. I didn't think too much else about it. So here it was 3 or 4 weeks later. I'm at the hotel. The phone rings. The staff said there was somebody downstairs to take me to dinner. I said, oh, okay, fine. So off I went down and I met Tapio. And he was very nice and he said that he had the car outside and it was raining and we were going to go to a nice restaurant overlooking the river. And it was the in place to go, of course. So off we went and sat there and talked from, I don't know, 6 to after 9. And just really nice conversations. And talked a lot about building the senior residence and running them and all that sort of stuff. After dinner, we were relaxing, and I didn't think too much about it. And suddenly, he reached down and came up with a bunch of papers. And he said, "Would you like to review these papers?" So I did, and it was interesting. It was realty and investing and this and that and the other thing. And then he smiled and when I got through, and he pointed and he goes, "That's the dollar amount you can put in, and that's your signature and date." I said, "Oh, like I'm going to give $1 million?" Well, I wasn't sure what to do. And finally I said, I wasn't that dumb. I said, "You know, all of my money is invested right now, and unfortunately, I don't have anything extra that I could invest in your project, but I think it's really a great project." Well, he went, I thought, well, what's this all about? Then the check came, and he sat there and he goes, I thought, well, so I said, I have to go to the bathroom. I got up and off I went to the bathroom. And I'm in the bathroom for a long time. And I come out and he's sitting there and he goes, "Well, the bill was paid." And then he said, "Well, it's still raining out. It's like 9:30. I'll drive you back to the hotel." So off we went to the hotel. He didn't really say much of anything. And then I got out and I said, "It was just wonderful meeting you. It was just wonderful talking about your projects and stuff, and I wish you the best." "Yes." I said, "Okay." So I go in, rushed in because it was still raining a little bit, and I got into my room and I couldn't help but laugh. I guess he figured I had millions of dollars, and so did the host back in San Francisco. So anyway, he was not happy, and guess what? I never heard from him again or from the host in San Francisco that I met. So goes life in the fast lane. Cheers. And my trip to Porto continues. After that exciting dinner with my friend or ex-friend Tapio, I got a good night's sleep, and the next day I did a 4-hour tour of Porto. It was okay. Lots of old buildings, churches, monasteries, but of course there's a picture of me standing with the great view of the hills and all the buildings on top of them, which I love the European style with the tile roofs and all the colors and things, the earth colors. Very, very nice. It was a 4-hour tour, but 2 of the 4 hours was all spent at the library, or the bookstore, I should say. Really spectacular. It was built in 1869. I think it's like 3 or 4 stories tall in the original building. The ceiling is a huge window, and lighting penetrates through the whole bookshelves. And there's all these fantastic staircases that twirl around and twist and turn, and all covered with red rugs, and just really spectacular. So we spent most of the time in there, but I don't think too many people actually bought a book. And yeah, one has to wonder now, because so many bookstores are closing down, that you can get everything online. So just like now, I don't buy any of my magazines anymore because the library allows you to download them, and a Scientific American is what, $16 or $18, and as a senior I can get that for free. So I do notice that many of the bookstores aren't doing as good as they used to, but that's what's happening in the new world of tech. The next day, I took a tour and we drove across the big new bridge over the river and we went up into the hills, and there are port cellars all over. We went to, I don't know, 8 or 10 of them, and we ended up at the Graham's port cellars, which the locals call the caves. Really spectacular. You learn how they make port, and these huge wooden barrels, they're like 15 feet high, 20 feet high, really unbelievable. And of course, there's a picture of me trying as many types of port as I can. So at the end of the day, I was a happy camper. Back to the hotel, and another nice evening to relax. The next day, I decided to take a short cruise on the Douro River. So I called a cab and down I went and walked around, and I found a boat and the captain, and he said that he gave tours, and about 6 or 8 people were uh, going to go on the tour, and off we went to the mouth of the river, and then we went up under the bridge, and then we came back, and then we went across on the other side, and there was a small town there, and village, I guess, more, and all kinds of places to shop and to eat and to have drinks. So we walked all around there for an hour or so, and then back onto the boat and across back, and we docked on the Porto side. And I was getting ready to get a cab to go back to the hotel, and there was a coffee shop there and a young man who was waiting on people, and he chatted with me. Very, very nice. Had a nice cup of coffee at the local coffee shop, as one should do when one's in another country. And after that, I called a cab and back to the hotel, and I got a really good night's sleep. Now, the hotel was very nice. They heard it was my birthday, so they gave me a free dinner and cocktails and everything else. Isn't that nice of them? The next day, I got up and went to the airport in Porto and flew to Lisbon. And Lisbon, I flew to London. And London, I flew to San Francisco. Another exciting birthday. And talk about lucky. Cheers. There's more to come.